Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. Our next story takes us out to the Big Apple as Sean Diddy Combs will be back in court today for day 2 of his trafficking and racketeering trial. Jury selection is set to resume with 19 jurors from the first day's pool moving on to the next stage. Fox 5 New York's Briella Tomasetti joins us live this morning outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan with the very latest details. A lot of eyes on this case, Briella. Good morning.
Gina, good morning to you. And I can tell you this, it's expected to be another busy day at court. As a reminder, yesterday, potential jurors were given a brief explanation of the charges. The judge also told them that the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty. One thing that really stands out that she says is that at one point, Diddy had a knife inside her mouth and then says, "I'm going to give you a Glasgow smile," which is, slitting someone's cheeks. But he's warned against it by a member of his team, saying Diddy's associates would prefer it if she, referring to Ashley, looked normal. She also says that they said to her they could ship her off and sell her to anyone in the world and she'd never be seen again by her parents or loved ones. Now, Ashley did make a police report in 2018 at the time of the alleged incident, and the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department confirmed her report was thoroughly investigated and it was determined the claims were unfounded. Diddy's team said Mr. Combs was nowhere near Orinda, California on the day that she claimed she was assaulted. There's no evidence that Mr. Combs was ever even in the same room as the alleged victim. She's completely unbelievable and no sane person who views the evidence will credit her story.
Nobody had to look at him for real. And the truth is nobody did. Everybody laughed and joked about him dancing like a idiot in all them goddamn videos, twirling around in circles. This a bit wild, So I'm just saying, they didn't know, and he wasn't telling them. They just know he got the budget. He go to LA, he talk to Clive, he come back with the bread. Apparently, he has this man's confidence. Yeah, I'm sure that man was very confident with his in his mouth.
We made love.
Who you made love with?
Diddy, Bow Wow, Busta Rhymes.
The last freak off tape that just got sold on the dark net, which I know because I monitor, went for $500 million. It had multiple stars in it. Nicki Minaj, Rihanna, Chris Brown, Justin Bieber, Drake. It was a really interesting night in Calabasas, and he just sold that footage.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Everyone knew he was the devil. He's been the devil for 30 years. He's been covered and protected by not only Clive Davis, but Lucian Grange. He was selected to be the demon that he is, to keep the culture in line so the industry could continue for all of its precious jewels. We have too many lost. The list of lost is ridiculous, and everyone knows Diddy was selected for this job. He's the Judas.
Ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government? He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what? Maybe I can break the model. Maybe I can show the world that a black man can win, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Buffy invited me
for weeks asking me to come and teach him how to, wanted me to be his acting coach for a while. Go there and he's sitting around just looking. I'm like, okay, what's the material you want to work on? He's just looking at me. Then next thing you know, okay, hey, will you help me? I want to hear your music. So I come over there and I play the music. And he's sitting there just looking at me, like waiting. Okay. So then my assistant was like, he wants to hang out with you next week. And I was like, for what? He's like, I think he's trying to f*** you.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent. And what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
You guys weren't even 18 years old. You couldn't escape. You couldn't get out of there. There were so many times I tried to intervene. There was a lot of times.
This is going to be such a massive trial, like maybe the biggest Hollywood trial. God knows which way it's going to go. Is it going to go on for weeks?
Oh, for sure, weeks.
At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes. As his lawyers argue, the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way. The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now. That will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
No, the deck is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's Black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's...
Back up a little bit.
How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case? No. Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case? I'm certain no. Okay. And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case. The criminal case. In the criminal, I know that in the criminal case, no.
She did. And when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
There's an arrest coming. There's actually 2 arrests that are already made. There's a 3rd one coming. I don't know why people are sitting on this. I'm ready. I see that some people are not. I've been ready. A lot of you are ready. Like, let's get this over with, right?
Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars. A magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, my concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95 that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
His lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges, but prosecutors said that he could not be trusted that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urge the judge to remand him.
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinions, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow that this is Epstein redux or something.
The biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
The courtroom was silent the moment Cassie stepped through the doors. Not tense, not curious, just still. You could feel the weight in the air, the kind of moment where everyone knows something heavy is about to fall, and no one's ready for the sound. Cassie Ventura, former R&B princess, longtime girlfriend of Sean Diddy Combs, and now the key witness in a federal trial for ace trafficking and abuse, walked to the stand like she'd been carrying the weight of this day for years. Hair pulled back, bare-faced, no flashy makeup, no Hollywood energy, just pain and resolve. And when she sat down, looked toward the jury, and said, "I was 19 when it started," the room shifted. This wasn't a celebrity scandal anymore. This was a reckoning. Cassie's voice cracked before the first sentence ended. She didn't dramatize. She didn't perform. She recounted the years of manipulation, the isolation, the coerced encounters, the moments when Diddy's power didn't just protect him. It paralyzed her. She described being introduced to a world that was dark, indulgent, and inescapable, the so-called lifestyle that was dressed up as luxury but built on control. And then came the part that silenced even the clicking of courtroom pens. The freak-off nights, the surveillance, the night she said she was forced into a degrading encounter with another man and nearly blacked out from being choked afterward. The room stopped breathing. Cassie stopped mid-sentence, pressing. Trembling fingers against her lips as the emotion overtook her. A few jurors blinked hard, looking away. One clutched a tissue but didn't move. And that's when it hit. This wasn't just testimony, this was trauma spilling into the open for the first time. And then, right in the middle of Cassie's statement, came something nobody expected. Diddy's daughters, seated quietly beside their father since the trial began, suddenly stood up and walked out. Not in protest, not in defiance, in grief. Their faces were turned away from the cameras. No words, just quiet sobs. And in that moment, every single person in that courtroom realized something. This wasn't about just winning a case. It was about unraveling years of truth no one was ever supposed to hear. And it makes you wonder, do you think Diddy's daughters are hearing these things for the first time like the rest of us? Or did they always know more than they let on? Tell me your take in the comments. And you know I'm replying to everyone on this one, because how this plays out isn't just about guilt or innocence, it's about how deep silence really runs. When the prosecution rested for the day, Diddy's attorney stood with that familiar confidence we always see from legal teams protecting power. Calm, precise, polished. They didn't deny everything. They admitted the relationship had extreme moments. They acknowledged it wasn't healthy. But then came the spin. This was consensual, private, part of a lifestyle both parties participated in willingly. The words didn't land. Not after what Cassie had just described. Not with a courtroom still visibly shaking from the realities she'd poured into the air. Because here's what the defense didn't count on. Emotion can't be cross-examined. And Cassie's breakdown wasn't strategy. It was survival. When she walked out of that courtroom, Cassie didn't look like someone who had won anything. She looked like someone who had survived something she was never meant to speak about, and spoke anyway. Her husband, Alex Fine, stood just behind her. No flash, no press conference, just quiet support. And online, the reaction was instant. We believe Cassie started trending within hours. Survivors shared their stories. Celebrities posted messages of support. People who had once stayed quiet now felt safe to say, "I see you," because this trial isn't just about Diddy anymore. It's about what happens when the woman the industry tried to silence becomes the woman the world chooses to believe. After Cassie left the stand, the room didn't just settle. It hung in a heavy pause. No one clapped, no one whispered, no one moved for a full 10 seconds. And that silence, it said everything. Because what she delivered wasn't just a personal story. It was the spine of the prosecution's entire strategy. A detailed, emotional map of what they say happened behind the luxury cars, the platinum records, the private jets. Her breakdown wasn't a moment, it was a trigger. Prosecutors knew what they were doing by starting with Cassie. She wasn't just Diddy's ex. She was the girl everyone watched grow up under his control. She was the one the tabloids painted as spoiled, as dramatic, as complicit. But on that stand, they made sure the jury saw her for what she really was, a survivor. A key witness, the reason this case exists. The prosecution didn't waste time. With Cassie's testimony fresh in everyone's mind, they started stitching together a timeline that painted Diddy not as chaotic, but calculated. They introduced photos from events where Cassie described being drugged, texts from his staff confirming discreet travel arrangements for those infamous freak-offs, financial records showing repeated payments to unidentified individuals on nights. Cassie said things went dark. But what really hit? The surveillance, not security tapes. Surveillance culture. Prosecutors revealed that Diddy allegedly kept footage from certain parties, ones Cassie claimed she was forced to attend, parties where she said things happened that no one would believe without proof. Now, they're saying, that proof might exist, and it might be locked in Diddy's own vault. When it was their turn, Diddy's team came out strong. They weren't shaken, not visibly. They leaned into the same argument. Cassie was a willing participant. She stayed for years. She traveled. She smiled on red carpets. They brought up old interviews, Instagram posts, footage of her at parties, dancing, laughing, dressed in designer. And you could feel the pivot happening. They wanted the jury to ask, if it was really that bad, why stay? But that's the dangerous part of this kind of defense, because survivors don't always run. They survive inside the trauma until they can't anymore. And the jury? They looked exhausted, not convinced, and definitely not moved. This trial isn't about forensics. It's not about hard evidence or DNA. It's about behavior, control, pattern. And that means everything comes down to how this jury feels. 12 strangers, now exposed to a story they likely never imagined, would unfold in front of them in graphic, emotional, and deeply human detail. Their reactions have been subtle but real. Tight jaws, clenched hands, watered eyes. Especially when Cassie described waking up the next morning after those parties, trying to pretend everything was normal, knowing what had happened and knowing she couldn't tell anyone. And that brings me to you. If you were sitting in that jury box, would you be able to listen without breaking? Or would you already know where your verdict was leaning? Let me know in the comments. I want your raw answer. No filter. I'll be replying to every single one because how we process this matters. This story isn't just being judged in court, it's being judged by all of us. Here's what's wild. This case isn't even close to over. More witnesses are expected, more evidence, possibly even more names. But no matter what happens next, one thing is clear. Cassie has already shaped the path of this trial. Not because she cried, not because of what she wore or how she looked, but because she did what so few ever get to do when someone powerful abuses that power. She told the truth out loud in front of the man who tried to bury her. And that truth, it's still echoing in that courtroom, whether Diddy's team wants to admit it or not. This is where the secrets start bleeding out. Cassie didn't just break down the courtroom, she broke down the dam. Because after her testimony, the prosecution didn't just sit back and let the emotion ride. They came prepared. Photos, surveillance, records, transaction logs, even private jet manifests. And each new document they introduced didn't just back up her timeline, it exposed a pattern. Suddenly, the stories Cassie told weren't just her own. They were part of something much, much bigger. The prosecution started weaving something that no one could ignore. That this wasn't just about one abuser and one survivor. It was about a system. Cassie had testified about handlers, men she didn't know who showed up during parties, coordinators who arranged hotel suites, women who had no reason to be there, except to perform, distract, or disappear when things got tense. And now, the documents were showing payments to these same unnamed individuals, hotel records that lined up exactly with the dates Cassie mentioned, confidential settlements, discrete payouts. This wasn't chaos, it was coordinated control. And for the jury, and for everyone watching, it was the first time Diddy's lavish lifestyle started to look less like indulgence and more like infrastructure for something much darker. Then came the whispers. A woman from the artist development team, a former security staffer, a man who once worked logistics for international tours. They weren't on the stand yet, but prosecutors revealed that several individuals, previously. Too afraid to come forward, had agreed to speak behind closed doors. Some under protection, some with sealed identities. And though their stories hadn't yet been shared publicly, their names were being whispered in the halls of that courthouse. People who had worked around Diddy for years. People who saw too much, said too little, and now, because of Cassie, felt like they had permission to finally tell the truth. And it makes you think, do you believe more witnesses are finally stepping up because of Cassie's bravery? Or were they just waiting to see if someone else would take the first hit? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll be responding to every single one. This moment is too important to stay quiet on, because if Cassie really did start a chain reaction, we might be about to hear truths we never imagined would come out. You could see it in the way the defense moved. They weren't rattled, not yet, but something shifted. Their tone got sharper. Their objections came faster. They tried to block exhibits from being introduced, especially the ones tied to Cassie's timeline. They leaned harder into discrediting her character, subtly at first, but more aggressively with each passing day. And still, it wasn't working, because the prosecution wasn't just presenting evidence. They were telling a story. And every new witness, every record, every photo Cassie described, now the jury had receipts to go with them. This wasn't he said, she said anymore. This was he said, and now here's the paper trail to prove she wasn't lying. Outside the courthouse, the mood has changed. What started as skeptical curiosity is now starting to feel like certainty. There are protest signs, survivor groups rallying, even former collaborators are choosing to stay quiet. Not because they don't care, but because they're not sure whose side they'll be caught standing on. And Cassie, she hasn't returned to court since her testimony. She doesn't need to, because her words haven't left. They're still hanging in that room, in the jury box, on every screen inside every reporter's notepad. And if this keeps moving the way it's going, she won't just be remembered as a witness. She'll be remembered as the one who shattered the illusion. After days of heavy silence and emotional fallout, the courtroom doors opened again. And this time, the witness stand didn't just belong to Cassie. This time, it was others. People who had been backstage, in the house, on the flights, around, for years, but never asked to speak. Until now, the first was a former bodyguard. Quiet, tight-shouldered, and clearly uncomfortable. He didn't want to be there. That much was clear. But the moment he confirmed that yes, he had personally escorted Cassie to at least 2 of the events described in her testimony, the courtroom shifted. Then came a former stylist, trembling as she described the rules Cassie had to follow, the clothes she had to wear, the strange orders that came from upstairs, and the panic whenever Cassie tried to push back. And as each new voice added another piece to the puzzle, it became harder and harder for anyone, jury included, to pretend this was just a bad breakup turned courtroom spectacle. This was something else. This was a pattern forming in real time. The prosecution took the opportunity and ran with it. They weren't just presenting new testimonies, they were connecting the dots. Private travel booked under aliases, assistant job descriptions that read more like obedience contracts, messages between Diddy's security team discussing guest handling logistics with references that lined up exactly with Cassie's timeline. And then came the moment that cracked the energy wide open. A former house manager, name withheld for safety, described a list of off-limit questions they were told never to ask Cassie. Where she was going, why she came home looking shaken, who had been with her. They were told, if she doesn't talk, you don't talk either. The room went cold, because now it wasn't just about Diddy's behavior, it was about the system built to hide it. The defense tried, of course. They objected more frequently. They called out inconsistencies in witness timelines. They tried to lean on Cassie's celebrity past, the parties, the fame, the luxury lifestyle she publicly flaunted. They wanted to reframe her as a willing participant who simply regrets her choices now that time has passed. But every time they pulled up another photo of her smiling beside Diddy, the courtroom didn't flinch because the jury had already heard her voice. They'd already seen her break, and now they were hearing people who had no reason to lie, staffers, employees, people with nothing to gain, tell the same story in their own quiet, haunted words. And it raises the question I want to ask you directly. Do you think the people around Diddy who stayed silent all these years are victims too? Or are they just as responsible for protecting the abuse? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading everyone. Because this part, it's complicated. Some of these people were scared, others were complicit. But now, they're all part of the same unraveling. Behind the scenes, things are shifting. Diddy's inner circle, the one that stayed close through decades of controversy, is fracturing. People once photographed by his side are now refusing interviews. Old collaborators are removing his name from credits. A major producer, once fiercely loyal, quietly backed out of a press appearance scheduled before the trial even began. No one is making dramatic exits. They're just backing away. And in an industry that feeds on status and fear, that silence says everything. Because when someone that powerful starts losing loyalty, it doesn't mean they're losing the case. It means they're losing control of the narrative. And that's when reputations die. Even though Cassie hasn't returned to the stand, her presence remains. Every witness that steps up ties their story back to her, directly or indirectly. And that's what makes her testimony so devastating. She didn't just speak first, she made it possible for others to speak at all. This trial has now become more than just a battle between two people. It's a spotlight burning through years of protected power, exposing the kind of secrets Hollywood has spent decades dressing up in diamonds and champagne. And no matter what Diddy's team says next, the jury has now heard too many voices to pretend this is just one woman's word against another man's image. The courtroom is buzzing again, not from Cassie, not from the staffers, but from the rumor that someone much closer, inside Diddy's own circle, may be preparing to testify. And if that happens, this case isn't just surviving, it's detonating. The prosecution has already built momentum. Cassie's testimony cracked the foundation. The former employees added weight. But to seal this case, they need someone from the inside to connect the last dots. Someone who saw the operations, someone who was in the room when the rules were made, not just followed. And now, they say that person might be ready to speak. There's a shift. The confidence fading. No more jokes from Diddy in the hallway. No more eye contact from his team when exhibits are introduced. Because if this insider really takes the stand, they'll have the power to confirm every system Cassie described, every freak off, every hush payment, every cover-up, and if they do, the jury won't just be emotional, they'll be convinced. What started as one woman's testimony has turned into an industry unmasking. Cassie opened the door. But the people walking through now, they're carrying the truth Diddy thought would stay buried forever. And that brings me to you. Straight up. If someone from Diddy's inner circle testifies, do you think he walks free? Or is this where the mask finally comes off? Drop your take in the comments. I'm in there, replying to everyone. We're not done watching this unfold. Not even close. No matter what happens next, whether the insider speaks or not, Diddy's image is already shattered. His secrets aren't just leaking, they're pouring out. And when the lights go down and the cameras shut off, only one thing will matter. Who was brave enough to speak? And who stayed silent. So if you've been watching this trial unfold like we have, and you feel like the walls around these protected celebrities are finally cracking, like the truth is no longer optional, then don't just scroll. Like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I reply to every single one, because this moment is bigger than Diddy. It's about what we allow to stay hidden, and who finally says enough.